It's nice to see all these people. Just for a quick introduction, my name's Phil, and I'm an instructor with the London Gnostic Association. And we put these public lectures, free public lectures together every once in a while. And we've never advertised on Facebook before. And we've never had this many people show up before. I guess it works. Yeah. So essentially, I'm not going to do a big ramble before we get into it because I know we're very interested in the chakras, and that's why we're here. And this is what the lecture is about. At our school, we study all kinds of spiritual things, the chakras being part of it. But many different sources, like we'll study different cultures, religions, mythologies, tarot, Kabbalah, alchemy, all of this symbolism, looking for the universal thread that runs through it. And that's really what Gnosticism is this universal thread. And so one idea is that all religions, all beliefs are precious pearls strung on the string of divinity, and that they're necessary for different people, temperaments, and that at the core, the reason there's so many similarities, although we tend to focus on the differences so we can have wars and whatnot, there's so many similarities because they're all connected with something we call truth. And it seems today, just in my humble opinion, that truth can be under attack because you can have your truth and I can have my truth and they can have their truth. So truth by definition is singular. If something's true, then it's true for everyone. So we have to think in a larger scale. Now we have our own beliefs and opinions, and of course, and we hold those dear. But what we're interested in is something we call truth, and ever looking for it, and always seeking for it. And people who come to these kind of lectures generally are seeking for something like that also. So I'm just going to have just a quick sort of house cleaning talk. Just that my suggestion is that we go through the talk, which is an hour or less, and we have questions after. That would maybe make it flow better, and also a lot of times people have questions that are coming up in the next couple of slides that could be answered, say. Another thing that I'm thinking, and these are not hard and fast rules, you can break them if you want, is when we're asking a question, let's try to put a question mark at the end of it, because we can sometimes turn into, this is how chakras actually are. No, then another person says, this is how they actually are. And someone stands up and says, I have a question. Wait, I have something to say. I have an audience now. But what we're really talking about here is the Gnostic introduction to the chakras. So right off the bat, we have our little modifier, Gnostic. So if it's different than a system you're aware of, or it's not what you find in the chakra Bible or a different system, then it's because this is the Gnostic introduction to chakras, which may be a slightly different take on it. Now I'm happy to take a few questions if anybody has a question regarding what's been said already, and then we'll get into the talk. Anybody have something pressing? We're all waiting to see how this unfolds, I get it. It's no problem. Can you hear me at the back? That's a question.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good? Okay, you'll be our person that you can go like this if you can't hear me, and I'll project more. People in the front, they just have to deal with a louder voice. But, renting a microphone seemed to be too much for our little center. We're going to, we don't want to be so bombastic that now we need a microphone because people are showing up. So, this is our group over here called the International Gnostic Association for Anthropological Studies. And on behalf of our organization, I'm going to present this lecture to you. And it's also international in as much as we're just the London branch of a worldwide school. This is not just a single little, some guy's idea. We have something like 6 to 8 Gnostic centers in Ontario, 23 in Quebec, it really took off there, and worldwide, lots, many, especially in South America and Mexico, because it originated in South America and Mexico. So, here we're going to talk about chakras as the flowers of the soul. And we'll try to get a deeper understanding, but my assumption is that most people have heard something about chakras before. That we're not coming in saying, well, this is the first time I've ever heard of chakras, better go find out what it is. We'll do a little bit of history, but not much. And then from there, we'll go into how we can use this in our lives, practically. So we're going to start with Hinduism, because as many people know, chakra is a Sanskrit word, and it means wheel or disc, and it implies an energy center or a disc. So this ancient tradition, like the ancient Hindu tradition in India, is this is where the word comes from. But they're not the only culture to have ever talked about these, but they're certainly one of the firsts, we'll say. And this is Krishna, who could be considered among many other beings or deities or figures in Hinduism as what we call a solar hero. Somebody who matches mythologically up with other solar heroes from other religions, mythologies, and legends. And you see him here playing the flute with the sacred cow. So, in Hinduism, they developed very exoterically, meaning very outwardly, this system that the body is comprised of many parts. Some of those parts are what we'll be referring to as subtle. And by subtle, we mean not perceptible by the physical senses. This is the subtle parts. So when we see diagrams like these, we have already seeing chakras as these wheels or discs. And in the center, we have a fellow that's an artistic depiction of the 7 main chakras, the 2 energetic channels they call Ida, Pingala, a central channel that runs up the spine they call Sushumna. And then on the picture on the left, there's a yogi practitioner. You can see them as flowers there, the chakras on his navel, and so on. And he's practicing what they call pranayama, the control of breath, because the breath is intimately linked to the internal energy. So this has been a practice that's come down for centuries, and it's not always easy to see where it would come in other cultures. Now, a cultural study isn't the whole point of what we're doing today. It's just how we're starting it off. So, but we know with pranayama, controlled breathing, and focus, they're isolating each one of these energy points because there's an idea in Hinduism of what they call prana. We'll get up to other cultures and what they call it, but this would be something like the spiritual component behind air, from something like the ether, which we'll get into a little bit later, but that runs throughout the whole body on specific meridian lines, and that energizes and enlivens the body. And here we have a bunch of yogic practices from, in Hinduism, a group that are generally labeled in the West as fakirs. So if you may have heard that, maybe you heard the word sadhu instead. These are Hindu holy men. Yeah, come and find a chair anyway, no problem. So, and one of the main objectives of the Hindu fakir or sadhu is physical exercises to give them control over the body, but also control over the breath, which gives them control over the prana, to slowly begin to awaken these centers. And we'll be getting into talking about awakening these centers, but just so I don't waste anybody's time, there's no quick pill for it. It's not an overnight thing. We have these guys who practice their whole lives, but with practice, tenacity, perseverance, patience, it's doable for sure. And what we get now, I'm talking about the West when I say we, everybody here in London, Ontario, Canada, North America. From this, we have now this tradition we call yoga. And probably many people here are yoga practitioners. It's very popular now. And I'm not a yoga practitioner myself, other than some of the yogic exercises we do in the Gnostic school. So I can't speak too much to it, other than that it does seem possible that it's become more a form of exercise than a form of spiritual practice in the West, or at least there's a component of it. But it does also seem like perhaps it can lead people into spirituality, but they'll have to do some digging. You're not going to awaken the chakras from a 20-minute hot yoga class at Good Life Fitness. This isn't the point, right? We're sweating, we're working, we're getting in, sort of like the fakirs, we're getting in touch with the body, and we're starting to conquer our movements, and the use of this beautiful vehicle. But of course, yoga was a religion, or is a religion, I should say. Is a religion. It's a spiritual practice. And an interesting thing with yoga is that if you look at the etymology of the word or its meaning, it means to bind back, or roughly speaking. And religare, which is the root of religion, means also to bind back. They have the same definition, these two words. And so, to bind back to what? Well, to the infinite source, no matter what we're calling it. This is the goal of all religion. This is the goal of yoga. This is the goal of self-development. And we can, I think, go deeper if we start to bring in more spiritual insight and more awareness of who it is we actually are and where it is we're actually going. Not to say to people that they shouldn't do yoga. That's not what we're saying. Because yoga, of course, is a good way in. With yoga, when did yoga come? Like the 60s with the Beatles? Maybe? I'm not sure. So with that, we get the first stream of Eastern influence, not the very first, but a strong stream of Eastern influence, and slowly it starts to spread and take off. And now we're becoming a global community. And here where we are now, 2019, we've reached that to an ever-increasing degree. So now we can see we have representatives of almost all cultures, faiths, religions, beliefs, ethnicities, all these groups in one area we call North America. And now we can really start to exchange ideas on wisdom traditions, spiritualities, and we can start to share. We don't want to squash that, for sure. We want to embrace that. And by we, I'm saying Gnostics. You don't have to be on board with that. But this is what it brought us, yoga. And it can bring us so much more. So I'm going to go now to a different culture. Of course, I'm not speaking in depth about any one culture, and we're trying to get to the practical aspect, so feel like you're not going to walk away here with a deep understanding of Hindu yoga. That wasn't the point of the Chakras lecture. But we can go to Buddhism, which is this other beautiful culture that flowered out of Hinduism. Much in the way that we can say Christianity and Judaism are linked. One led to another. And of course, they still remain their own. But the same way with Hinduism into Buddhism. We know Gautama Buddha was a sadhu, which is an Indian holy man, which was Hindu. And they're such a similar traditions. And as they carry on the tradition of Buddhism, we see an ever still what I would call exoteric understanding of chakras and subtle energies of the subtle bodies. By exoteric, I mean just blatant and open about it. So like if you read through the sutras, or if you read through an older, the yogic texts, they'll be talking about, you have, I'm paraphrasing of course, you have 7 chakras, energy centers within you. And then later, like we're going to look at Christianity, and you're going to think, they don't ever talk about chakras. That's not a thing. But it becomes then what we call esoteric. It means below the surface. They become below the surface. But here's Buddhism. And Buddhism has a long culture, and this is Tibetan Buddhism particularly that these pictures are from, of associating the physical body with the subtle bodies and subtle energies. We see the person in the middle here with the energy centers. Of course, you have a little bit of variations. Now there's not 7, but 5, and we're going to look at Taoism that has 3. But the principles are all the same. And so when in Buddhism they were discussing health, and when health came into the question, first of all, the doctors were all monks. They're all heavily trained Buddhists. So the spiritual interpretation of the body was integral with the medical interpretation of the body, and the idea that these subtle bodies and energies are a direct part of the human being and can't be forgotten. And we say in the West, oh yeah, we can forget about them. Look what we've done. We forgot about them. So now we treat everything with a pill and we suppress a symptom without going to the cause. But I'm not trying to do anything political here for a weird sleight of hand. So, in this next one, this is also from Tibetan Buddhism, but now we see these what we call like the meridian lines, and the meridian lines being these energetic sort of intermeshed lines. By energetic, I mean you can't, with a scalpel, come on in, fella, don't be shy. You can't, with a scalpel, see them. You're not going to open up the human body and find the meridian line that goes to the heart chakra. This is why we're talking about subtle bodies. But they they in Tibetan Buddhism and other cultures, of course, have done these really intricate mappings of the human body and with its counterpart, the subtle body. Or we'll call it a spiritual body for now, but we're really going to get into what those are and how we can work with the chakras in those bodies. And then out of that, and not just out of Buddhism, but of course Taoism, we have now like acupuncture. This is the whole premise of acupuncture. These energetic meridians that are running in your body, you can't see them, they're not nerves, they're not veins, it's not blood vessels, it's the inner energies. And so we have also in the West is taking off what they call TCM, or traditional Chinese medicine, which bases it on the idea of a spiritual body. For us, I think I'm saying us like there's this big separation. It's not. For the Western mind, we'll say, for a long time we were dominated by rational science and materialism. And we're still in an age of ever-growing materialism, for sure. So this is taking off, too. And people who are very interested in chakras and spirituality and energies and energy healings and Reiki and all of this kind of thing is also taking off. So we see as we become at one polarity, maybe very atheistic, materialistic, scientific. I'm saying scientific with sort of like in a parenthesis because you couldn't tell the Buddhist monks that they're not being scientific with their research. So, well, we meditated on this for about 13 years. We're pretty sure this works and we've seen the results. But what would be nice is to get back to a balance, I would say. But it's up to each individual again. So with Buddhism, we have many great things also, and I'm going to digress a little bit, but I always had this, I used to have this very romantic idea of Buddhism, because I was an altar boy raised Roman Catholic, had no real problem with it, don't have a problem with it, but when I was a teenager, I went through the teenage crisis, and I was really getting into the Dalai Lama, and I thought, well, how is the Dalai Lama going to hell because he doesn't believe in Jesus? That doesn't make sense to me. So something had to be going on there that I thought, it's not exactly right. And then from that sort of idea, I had this romanticism about Buddhism. It would be nice just to go on a Buddhist retreat and just spend like 3 months and just meditate and eat vegetarian food. I could deal with that probably, But then when I, looking into Buddhism and these children that their parents with great honor take them to the monastery, say in Tibet, to become monks, the amount of discipline that the average Buddhist monk has will blow our minds in the West. This is not for me particularly, it would blow my mind. It's not just like, we're going to de-stress and then come back to the office. This is a 24/7 way of life with something like 615 precepts of rules you have to live by every single day, meditation in and out. So, and they have a lot of great results based on it. So that's one thing to keep in the back of our mind. Hard work pays off. Nothing really worthwhile comes easily. And then another saying that's something like, it's not going to be easy, but it is going to be worth it. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go on also. Okay, so we'll go now to perhaps, I'm not debating history of these cultures, but perhaps an even older culture, Asian, Chinese culture, Taoism. This is where we get the yin-yang from. And in Taoism, again, we still have a very exoteric interpretation of these energy centers. So we have these beautiful artworks. These are all wood carvings. But they're depicting, if you see this fellow on your left, he has the furnace down here, then up at the heart level another one, and then up at the brain is where they all meet. And the fellow on the right, similarly you can see in the torso region, these are all energy centers, with the cauldron being at the base and then rising to spirit near the top. The one in the middle is very beautiful. That's an opinion, of course. But it starts down in the fields, in the waters, and there's a path that leads all the way up, but you can superimpose that on the human body, and you have the spine, you have the lower chakras, the heart chakra, you see the two suns, the red and the yellow, the pineal and the pituitary glands, or the third eye chakra and the crown chakra. All of these were really beautifully illustrated in Taoism and in a deep part of the culture. And still are. Here's some more modern interpretations, but these things that we call chakras in Sanskrit. In the Chinese, they call dantians or tantians. I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. But there's three main ones, which are these three main energy centers, which are the equivalent of the chakras. And the idea that it starts lowest with the physical, and then turns into, not prana, but in this culture, it's called chi. Probably you've heard of chi. It's pretty famous now. So chi is the spiritual energy that flows through the meridians in the body in this culture. And through cultivating chi, you slowly incarnate what they call shen, for spirit, the spirit. So it goes from jing, which is the lowest physical element, into energy, which they call chi, and from energy into spirituality or spirit, which they call shen. So we're getting through the cultural study. And then, of course, out of this we have Tai Chi. And again, from maybe the Buddhist tradition of Shaolin Kung Fu, which is similar, we have Qigong. All of these systems are working with the inner energy. So if you see the Tai Chi, I don't practice Tai Chi, I don't know, but if you have these really slow movements, you know that they're concentrating with positive emotion and deep focus on the inner energies. That's why they do it. You know, then you have these movies that come out like Tai Chi Master, and you think, how's this slow guy going to beat up Bruce Lee? And that's not what it was for. It wasn't really a form of martial art, but it's a form of inner cultivation of these energies. And Qigong, similarly, you know, in the Shaolin monks, way back there was this great sage who came over. Oh, I just lost his name. So they call him Dao Mo in Japan, because he also started Zen meditation or Zen Buddhism. And he came and found that they were out of shape. The monks were out of shape. So he started to give them exercises that they could use to revitalize their energetic bodies. And slowly those exercises became Qigong. And slowly they turned into animal forms. And slowly they became a martial art that's called Kung Fu. And this Kung Fu still means energy and man. So the whole idea was, and you know, when I was a teenager, if you guys want to hear me brag about myself for a little bit, I got a black belt in Kung Fu because I was really into Bruce Lee. I thought he was great. But I had no knowledge of inner cultivation. It wasn't a spiritual path. It was just something I thought was cool because I can learn how to do a roundhouse kick. And I've since forgotten all of it. So, but we have now in the West Tai Chi and all these sort of the benefits people are experiencing from it because they're slowly getting into touch with these energetic, subtle bodies again. And this is, I think, another one of these great ways in to commonality amongst metaphysical beliefs, religions, spiritual ideas. The idea being that, you know, I'm not going to put my own ideas, I'm just going to put questions out there. Especially if there are some major faiths that are what we call monotheistic. And then, so a question, and don't need an answer, is, would there be a different God creating one group of people, and then a different God creating another group of people, and then a different God creating these group of people? But if there's one God or one source or one energy, then it's sort of like this Buddhist, you probably all heard the story of the blind monks and the elephant, where there's 5 blind monks around an elephant, and they have to see what it is. So one grabs the tail and says, oh, an elephant is like a snake with a furry hairdo. And the other one grabs a tusk and says, oh, an elephant is sharp. And the other one touches the trunk. Oh, it's sort of long and muscular. One touches the foot. It's really thick and heavy. And now they all start fighting about what the elephant is. But they're just looking at different aspects. There's one way to approach, if you want to approach how to bridge gaps between spiritual ideas. But anyways, I'm not preaching or anything. So let's go into Christianity. So Christianity is probably the most prevalent belief system in the West. I think that's just a stat. And it seems like it's not so concerned with something like chakras, which would be a fair assessment if we especially take what we call the esoteric interpretation, literal interpretation. But there is a book that's very interesting if you read it with sort of the esoteric interpretation, with an inner interpretation. And that's called the Book of Revelations, that talks about the 7 candlesticks before the throne and the 7 seals being broken. But unfortunately, I feel like like for me personally, say growing up through Catholicism, I took sort of my parents' interpretation of a religious tradition as what the religious tradition was. But they didn't. So I was like, maybe Christianity is bogus. I thought at one time in my life, because it's just a bunch of rules trying to keep me down. You know, I was 13. You can't keep me down, man. I live my life. But now going back with new eyes and looking at it, you see this book, Revelation, and even we think of it as the apocalypse. And then now we start to envision destruction and fire and the end of the world, even though apocalypse and revelation mean the same thing. A revelation, an inner revelation, learning something new. And that whole book can be read as the internal path that one person goes through as they open chakra to chakra to chakra to chakra. The solar hero in that tradition, of course, would be Christ. And he goes to each of the 7 churches. And he tells them what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right. And then he's the one who opens the 7 seals. All of these are direct sort of, in the Gnostic interpretation, they're directly related to the chakras and an individual experience, the individual awakening to like what we would call enlightenment, and not some kind of mass destructive event that we're being punished for. So there's something to take into consideration. People may have heard this before. There's a really famous, I don't want to say medium, but his name was Edgar Casey. He was called the Sleeping Prophet. And he would go into these trances, and he would pull from the Akashic records, which we'll talk about in a little bit, all of these things that blew his own mind. He's like, that can't be true because I'm a Bible-believing Christian. But one thing is a whole set of readings he did on Revelation as a book of inner enlightenment, going through chakra to chakra to chakra. It's an interesting read, for sure. And when we start to approach these stories not as literal fact, but as spiritual fact, then they take on even more relevance than they may have had before. All of these books can be looked at in this way. But maybe we're going too far in this direction, so let's just talk about the chakras now. So one thing is, we have these 3 solar heroes about these traditions that we've looked at already. We have Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, and all of them across time, they're depicted with the halo. The halo is this international sign of an enlightened or holy person. You can find it in virtually all cultures. This, in relation to chakras, would be the equivalent of awakening the crown chakra, and that's what brings enlightenment. And these beings that have done it or represent the possibility of doing it are being depicted artistically this way. This is why the halo is so universal. It's as though they've awakened that final chakra. Okay, so that's where we could go. We could be like completely awakened beings. You know, there's a double-edged sword now. Because if we want to awaken our consciousness, we have to first start from the preposition that our consciousness is asleep. If it wasn't asleep, how would we wake it up? If I couldn't attain to higher levels of perception, then this idea that there must be lower levels of perception, and that's where we are. It's a good preposition. Thank you for closing the door. Now I'll just ask that someone who's near the door, if anybody is coming in, we just open it for them because it locks. We don't want to lock anybody out. So we're going to get into this idea of where we are now, because it would be easy for me to say there's a third eye chakra that's related to clairvoyance. So now I'll just look through your third eye. I'm like, not really doing it, but maybe some of you are, but most of us are like, no, not seeing anything through my third eye. Oh, if you just realize you're divine. Okay, I'm trying to realize that nope, still feel like me. So we need actual practical steps. We need to practically work towards a goal. And the goal is, we could call in the Buddhist tradition, enlightenment. In the Christian tradition, eternal revelation. This is the goal to work towards, which is an ever increasing steps towards higher levels of consciousness, with the idea that we're starting at a lower one. So we can look at first the 4 kingdoms of nature, we call them. And this is very, I think, graspable. If not, feel free to throw tomatoes. So there's the mineral kingdom. This comprises our physical world. Everything that's mineral, rocks, all of these. Now, there's another kingdom that this is very physical, the mineral kingdom. Pick up a rock, hold it, feel its weight. There's another kingdom that has more consciousness than the mineral kingdom, that goes up in degrees, and we call it the vegetal or the plant kingdom. Now we're seeing, of course, our beautiful flowers, they have a physical body made of the minerals and materials of the physical world, but there's a life substance in them now. Photosynthesis. There's this sort of electric quality. And now there's a kingdom that has more consciousness than that, say. That would be our animal kingdom. You guys can say, if you want, that's why I So our puppy here also has a physical body, has all of these life processes going on within it that it's not aware of, but it has something else. Instincts, desires, mostly in the instinctual realm. And then there's one more kingdom that's even a little more, we'll say a little more conscious than this kingdom. Probably you can guess by now, but this would be our human kingdom. It's meditating at work, you see? It can be done. So the human kingdom, we have essentially we have 4 elements. We have the physical body, right? We have life processes going on. We have instincts and desires. Then we have one other thing that we call the intellect, which makes us so superior from all those animals that live in homeostasis and harmony with their environment. So let's look at that now with the human being. We have mineral, vegetal, animal, human. Well, everybody in here, just because of the grace of being born into this world, we all have a physical body. Thank you to the people who gave it to us from human generation. Now we all possess that. And it's the most graspable because we can literally grasp it. There's the physical body. I have one. Now, and it's related with this, it relates us with what we call the mineral kingdom because it's made of the same minerals of the earth. It's made of the same minerals of this physical world. And it's very tangible and corporeal. We have this thing now that we call in, say, spiritual schools or spirituality, or another word that we sometimes use, occultism, don't be scared by it. This thing called an etheric body. This is simply the energetic body that keeps the physical body alive. So that you can be sitting in the chair, paying attention or not, it's fine, but you're continuing to breathe, digest. All of these life processes are going on inside your body right now because of this etheric component. So one way to see it more clearly would be the idea is if our physical body was here and the etheric body, say for some reason, left the physical body, we would call that physical death because the physical body is now going to start to decompose. It's the etheric body that's the life force, and some people who are sensitive will say, or people who claim clairvoyance and all of these things, can see auras around people. This is this magnetic, energetic field created by this life-giving body. Even the etheric body is sometimes called the vital body, the higher component. So let's go a little bit further. Here's something called the astral body, also in occultism or spirituality. And this is the body that is associated with all of our desires. Our desires are also instincts and our feelings. So, for instance, let's say if I'm standing here in front of you and I have the mineral and I have the vegetal, or more precisely, I have a physical body and an etheric body, but the astral's gone, then I'll be very robotronic. Say, can't smile, I don't have feelings. I'll be less nervous. Might be a good thing. But the whole idea is that this is the part of us interwoven that relates to feelings and desires. And then one more, it's called the mental body. And this mental body is what relates us to the mental world, the world of ideas and concepts. And that way we can have all this, we have these great, wonderful ideas of how we can fulfill our most base desires. So our astral body is using it mostly. But this is something that It's called in other systems the fourfold human being. And in our talk today, it's what's going to really help us open the door to the chakras and what the chakras are. Because like we said, when we cut open the physical body, you're not going to find a heart chakra in there. You're going to find a physical heart. And if you're cutting over the physical body, you're not going to find anything etheric because you just did that for the person. Unless they're, if it's like a heart surgery, they're fine, right? So let's go look at these specifically. We'll look at, just quickly, the physical body, the etheric body, and then these other two, which we're calling now subtle bodies, because we can't perceive them with the organs of perception, normal organs of perception. So we'll start first with the physical body. And we have in our physical body the endocrine glands and organs. And everybody gets these. Thank you. And the physical body is this laboratory where all of these endocrine glands and the organs working in harmony are producing all kinds of hormones, and they're regulating everything, even including up to possibly around to our mood, but that's more connected with the etheric body. But this is the physical body. Any debates on that? Organs, endocrine glands, there's more in there, I know, but I'm not a doctor. Right? So then when we go beyond, and we look at the etheric, we have now nerve plexuses, and the nervous system, the firing synapses, this sort of electricity that gives us what we call life. And this is a result of these etheric bodies, and you can see the nerves for sure. But, if you ever were to dissect a cadaver, if you have to, then you'll see the nerves, but not the living nerve, of course. You're not going to see it with the electricity. But this, they call the nerve plexuses, and they have an interesting correlation to the chakras. If we're starting to think of 7 main chakras, you start to see how they bundle. What we're really going to be looking at is how, from the most subtle spiritual worlds, there's a slow condensation down to the physical. And so, at this level, it's condensing down into the human bioelectric system, the nervous system, and then that condenses down into organs and endocrine glands and skin, and everything that I think is me, that I call me. But now we have to go a little bit further. We have to go into the subtle bodies. So the two that we mentioned again is the astral body and the mental body. The astral body, sort of as this recap, is the body of emotions, the body of desires, instincts, and it's related to the animal kingdom. This is also, which is another topic we cover sometimes in public lectures, lucid dreaming, astral projection. When we dream, we're in the astral body, separated from the physical and etheric. I wasn't really planning on going, but there it is. The etheric is fine. The etheric's fine with the physical body, actually preferred, because our etheric body is always trying to heal the physical body because it knows how to heal itself. That's the wisdom of the human body. But our feelings keep getting in the way. Nothing wrong physically with my body. The etheric body's trying to heal it, but I feel down and I feel depressed, and my body's like, okay, so cortisol then? Okay, yeah, cortisol. Let's have some more stress hormone. Let's start to sort of slowly destroy our body with our feelings. And then there's a repose every once in a while. We fall asleep, and that body leaves, and the etheric body's like, okay, let's fix what we can while this guy's gone. And then when they come back, we'll be damage control. And then, just like the etheric body can be considered the higher component of the physical body. Yeah, we have chairs. Do you guys want chairs? There's chairs.
There's 2 ladies.
Yeah, come on, there's chairs. People, there's two chairs right up front. Let's not stand. You can sit on the floor if it's your preference, no problem. I can tell people how to live their lives. Yeah, come on, 5 chairs, no problem. You can see each other's faces. So just like the etheric would be considered like the higher component of the physical, keeping it alive, the mental body, the body of thought and intelligence, it has a similar relationship to our astral body. It's our body of thoughts, calculations, reasoning, and it's what connects us to the human kingdom. Okay, so I'll let you in on this sidebar, that in the Gnostic tradition, people are generally called intellectual animals, mistakenly called human. Because we haven't fully accessed the power of our consciousness, and the mental body is being used mostly to, in a sophisticated way, fulfill our animalistic desires. That means I have all these sort of desires that need to be met, but I can put on a tie, and you won't know that behind my eyes are going all these bestial desires and needs for all the things you can imagine. And then my mental body says, well, what if you pretend to be a nice guy? Okay, maybe I can get my desires done. So until we can bring more consciousness to these bodies, then becoming human is actually a slower process in the Gnostic tradition. And it's what we're working towards. Becoming human and beyond. Maybe that'll be our next lecture. Human and beyond. So this brings us now to the chakras. Well, why? Well, we just talked about an astral body and an etheric body. There are no nerves in those bodies. Certainly no organs. But the organs that are condensations of the nerve plexuses, and the nervous plexuses are further condensations of spiritual energy, or what we'll call in the astral body, the chakras. This is where the chakras come in. So of course the chakras are related to us right here and now, because certain endocrine glands and plexuses are being fueled by the spiritual energy that condenses, and we call those chakras, both in the astral body and in the mental body. This is where they are. If we're not conscious of our subtle bodies, then of course we won't be conscious of the chakras. I mean, I don't even know which side my liver's on, and so I'm not fully conscious of my physical body, let alone the chakras of my astral body, but of course we can become conscious of them. So we'll start with just these introductions that a lot of people probably know, just some of the Sanskrit terms or the Sanskrit names. We have the chakra Muladhara, which is called also the root chakra, the chakra Svadhisthana, the sacral chakra, Manipura, the solar plexus. You have a gut feeling? Oh, there it is, right there. Your gut feeling. The Anahata chakra at the level of the heart, or we call the heart chakra. There's Vishuddha, the throat chakra. In the West, we just make it easy, not easier, but we just don't use those words because, well, we do use those words, but we also put our own words like throat chakra, heart chakra. The Ajna chakra, we call third eye. And the Sahasrara chakra. So these are the traditional names for these chakras. But we're going to look at some other elements of the chakra so we can have a better idea of them. So let's look at a thing called tattvas, which is another Hindu or Indian tradition. A lot of people are familiar with it if they're familiar with Ayurveda, this sort of Ayurvedic cooking, but it's more than just cooking, of course. But Ayurveda deals with it. And this is the idea of all of the elements that make up the physical world. So there's Prithvi, related with the Muladhara. That's the element that crystallizes down or condenses down into earth, the element of earth itself. Then there's Apis, which is water, and we see it located on the human being where the waters are, the regenerative or generative fluids. And this is Apis is the ether or spiritual substance that condenses down to water. But we're also going from this idea that the human being is the microcosm of the macrocosm and a reflection of nature. If you want to understand nature, then you have to understand yourself. If you want to understand the macrocosm, the universe, the spiritual worlds, you have to understand yourself. This is why we say everything's within, but that's sort of cliche, because you can't just, someone can't say like, you know, I'm looking for answers. Oh, it's within. Okay, I'll just go mind my own business. Thanks for nothing. Right? So then, going up, we have Tejas, which is the fire, the digestive fires in the body. The Tejas itself is the spiritual energy that becomes the physical element of fire. Yeah, that's why we have these elements. Then we have Vayu, which is air. We see it at the level of the respiratory system and lungs in the human being. And now we're going to get more subtle again. So we have Akash, which is like the spiritual substance that all of these four lower ones come out of and then become the four elements. But this is at the level of the throat. So we have now an idea about the importance of our speech and the idea that speech should be controlled as an idea. Because there is a divinity to it. There is a creation. Now, of course, most religions, mythologies, and legends, a lot of times you see creation, like the world, being spoken or sung into existence. So in Christianity, God said, "Let there be light." In the Kalevala, the Finnish tradition, they tell the stories by singing them because it was the song that started creation. So for us, now we can have an idea that our words have the power to create. Of course they do. Even on the most superficial level. If I start speaking horribly to you, abusively, I'm going to start to create a horribly awkward environment. So even on that level, then you maybe have seen all these people do these experiments with rice sometimes, and they're yelling at them and swearing at it, and it molds quickly, and they're saying beautiful things to it, and it doesn't mold so quickly. But even we have this fancy word we call abracadabra. You guys know that one? No hat, no rabbit, right? But it even comes down from an older tradition of Kabbalah in the Hebrew, which is sort of just transliterated into English as abracadabra. But in the Hebrew, which I'm not going to pronounce exactly correctly, so forgive me, it's something like abracadabra. And it means I create as I speak. That's the translation of it. And we hang on to it through like cartoons of Merlin, a wizard, you know, or magicians. But the idea is that we have responsibility for what we say because we are creating as we go. Luckily, on the physical plane where we are, there's like, we have a desire and we have an action, but we have to put something else in between those. It's called willpower. So I could say all day long, I want a Ferrari. I want a Ferrari. But if I don't do any physical action towards that goal, it's not going to manifest, despite what the secret says. Sorry, everybody. And can you imagine if there is this, which I'm not saying there's not, an all-powerful spiritual power, and it's out there in the universe for you to access so you can get more dates. You can find a parking spot to the lecture. Come on. He's got to find a deeper way to use this than that. So we're going to continue going up. This is called Adi, in other traditions something else, but it's the spiritual component of Akash. This is essentially our consciousness. So we all get this little universe inside our heads that we call our consciousness. And now I have my consciousness, and you have yours, and you have yours. And there's like as many different universes going on right now as there are people, because we have this little gift, that's an amazing gift, but we think it's mine. I can use it how I want. Nobody knows what I'm thinking. Maybe I'm a horrible person, and you'll never know because it's all behind my eyes. You'll never see it. But when we go higher to what's called Samadhi, this is the universal source of our individual consciousness. It's like we have a single drop from this ocean. And one thing that I didn't really mention about the bodies, because I see I'm a talker and I'm talking a lot, is that also, just like our physical body, it puts us in the physical world. So I have a physical body, a physical world, a vehicle to interact with a space. I have an astral body, or a dream body. There's a dream world, or an astral world, and that's the body I use. Well, how come I can't remember my dreams? How come I'm not conscious about it? Because I'm not conscious of my astral body. I haven't brought consciousness to it. If I work with the chakras, this is what we're really beginning to do. Not just for that reason, but other reasons also. So here's the lotus flowers idea, which is just a little bit of information, I suppose. But often they're showed as, the chakras are shown as flowers. And here's this famous depiction of them. We have the 4 petals, one in Muladhara. We have the 6 petals, sacral, 10, 12, 16, 2, and 1,000. And what we're talking about generally with these petals are what's called in Sanskrit nadis, or nadis, which are energetic channels that flow that energy to other parts of the body. Now there's more than 7 chakras, and I think people have an understanding of that. There's many, 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 many chakras, because your entire astral body and mental body are made up of that exact energy. Where we have organs and nerves, there's chakras and energy centers. But they all interconnect and interpenetrate, and they use these channels. Okay, so let's see, what can we do with the chakras at least? What's the point? This is what's called, again, there's the word occult, but occult, you know, means hidden, yes?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean witches' Sabbath, right? Doesn't mean black hats and black cats. No, it just means hidden. And by hidden, we mean that it's latent within everybody, sitting dormant, waiting to be awoken. And so when we begin to awake these chakras, which we'll show in the next couple slides, how in the Gnostic tradition it's perceived that we can do it, we become what's called lords of the earth, but this is just an interesting way of saying very healthy. The philosophical earth is always the physical body. And with the awakening of the first chakra comes health. The second one is related in the Gnostic tradition with astral projection. By working with this chakra, awakening this chakra, we slowly become more conscious of our higher bodies. Because higher bodies are born of the same energy that physical bodies are born of. This has been known for centuries, if you go back to the Indian traditions and Tantra traditions and all kinds of these traditions that speak of the energy of life. Next, telepathy would be cool. This is in the solar plexus, and this is also why we have the gut feeling, because we're receiving subtle impressions from people, whether we're conscious of it or not. So you can like somebody, but you don't know why. Or you can dislike them and you don't know why. It can be because you're receiving something in that chakra. It can also be psychologically that they're wearing the same glasses that remind you of that boring Gnostic instructor, and that's why you don't like them. So you have to be careful. Not everything is so divine, right? We have a psyche we have to take into account also. The heart chakra, anahata, is related to intuition and inspiration. So intuitional knowledge means that knowing beyond reasoning, beyond the intellect, to see and to know. We can get glimpses of it all the time. When, simply something simple, we feel like, I should turn left and go home the long way. No, that makes no sense. Why would I do that? I'm not taking more time. And then you go the normal way that you usually go, and there's a big traffic jam, say. Like, oh man, should have listened to my intuition, like the secret told me to do. So then we have the throat chakra, which is our power of speech, but related with the occult faculty of what's called clairaudience. Clairaudience, like we all know probably clairvoyance, which we'll just put up. Oh, it's over here. Yeah. Clairaudience is like clairvoyance, but clairvoyance is to see clearly. So clairaudience is to hear clearly. And now we can start to perceive audibly, but in a subtle way, what's around us, but not physical. Here's one thing to understand about the chakras is these are organs of perception for these spiritual worlds and spiritual bodies. So once you can develop them and clean them and purify them, and we'll look at another thing that has to go, but then you can start to perceive what's already there. So for instance, we have like every song on the radio is in the room with us right now. We know that, right? But we just turn the radio and then we can listen to it. That would be like the organ of perception. So we could be surrounded by beautiful spiritual beings. But without the organ of perception, we can't see it. We can't know that. So these organs add already to what we have with sight and taste and touch and hearing and smell to extend beyond the merely physical. The next one is in the pulmonary chakras. You'll see why. But it's called ultra memory. This is memory of past lives. So now we're opening the door to all kinds of things. So now you see in Gnostic tradition there's already this whole underlying structure of previous lives, reincarnation, which many cultures talk about, even if it's esoteric and not exoteric. But these chakras are related with the ultra memory. We have a pretty good memory. Maybe you guys do. I had to go back home because I forgot something, so maybe yours is better than mine. But to remember where we've been, or to remember being two, or to remember what happens every night that we fall asleep, and take it back to the previous, this is what we call ultra memory. Then there's clairvoyance, like clairaudience, the ability to start to perceive in a visual way what's already around us in the spiritual worlds, in the astral and the mental worlds. Okay. Then there's what's called polyvoyance, which is essentially like all-knowing, because you're tapped back into the source. The reason why we add these pulmonary chakras as one of the, we'll see as 7 main ones, because in the Gnostic tradition, there's no way of working with the crown chakra that doesn't involve first opening each individual chakra and working your way up. There's no mantra for it. There's no meditation for it. I know it's different in other schools, just so I can put that out there. It comes as like a crown, culminating crown when the other chakras are awakened. That's what connects us back to this polyvoyance being like the samadhi, the universal knowing, which is what Gnosis means, by the way. I haven't said too much about it. But Gnosis is a Greek word that means knowledge, with the caveat that it denotes directly experienced knowledge for the self. So now we have vowels that we can use in the form of mantras to work with each one of these chakras. S is related with Muladhara. Now some people may be aware, because they know about chakras, but there's something special in that chakra that resembles a serpent, which in a lot of traditions we call it Kundalini. Yeah, someone said it, yeah? Yeah, come in, it's over there. Yeah, the Kundalini. And this S is how we work with this chakra. Now we'll deepen a little bit too. There's M, which works with, I know it says vowels, right? Yeah, those are my vowels. It knows they're vowels, okay? But they are seriously considered Gnosis and vowels. So the M is related with the sacral chakra, the awakening of that one. And you pronounce a mantra like that as Okay, I'll stay away from jokes. So then we have the pulmonary chakras, and we work with those with the mantra It's not just mantralizing, but we'll see some more. Then there's the solar plexus. The heart, probably a lot of people are familiar with it. The throat is an E, pronounced A. The third eye is an I, pronounced E. Is it confusing? Only if you're a native English speaker, you don't speak, say, Spanish or other languages that have very clearly defined vowel sounds. So we have it like this. I as in ski, E as in way, A, O as in snow, U as in blue, A as in saw, and M, S, the fire. So this is the first way we work with the chakras in Gnosis, is through mantralizing these sounds. There are mantras also that could be, wait, I set up cameras. Are people taking pictures? You want to take pictures? Should I be in it? No. So these are more Sanskrit, but gur, again, you don't have a cooler mantra for that one, okay? Then the solar plexus is Ram. The heart, O, Han. And then the Om, which everybody knows. Om. So these are other mantras we can use. In truth, we mostly focus on the 7 vowels in our Gnostic practices, but we combine them with some other things that we're going to look at too. So, and this is what I mean we combine them with. We're trying to work with the astral body and the mental body. Who remembers what the astral body is related to? Emotions. Yeah, they're with me. All right. And the mental body? Thoughts. Yeah. If you got the wrong answer, you're not getting kicked out, so don't worry. So how do we work with those and with mantralization? 2 ways. Positive emotion, or deep feeling, in a very mystical state. In a very calm mystical state, we calm the astral body first by meditating through the 4 bodies and relaxing that body. That means letting go of all our feelings and stress. And the mental body, deep concentration. We're concentrating all of our attention and focus on the area, on the chakra that we're mantralizing, with strong mystical emotion, foregoing all other thoughts, trying to keep all other feelings out, even joy and happiness, because we don't want to detract from our practice. And by doing positive emotion and concentration, and those mantralizations of those vowels especially, we're focusing a lot of attention on our astral and mental bodies. And that practice is considered like working out for the astral body, mental body. It's like lifting weights. It's a strengthening. And by working with that exact practice, the 7 vowels, E, A, O, U, A, M, S, is said that it's better to do that practice for 1 hour a day than read 1,000 books on spirituality and occultism. Because this starts to lead to direct personal experience. And you don't, right now we're taking everything at face value as a theory that someone's saying, which is where everything starts. But if we can't verify it, then what's the point of it? So to start working with it in our lives, we can utilize these ways. Okay, now we have the churches, which is going to bring another element to it. Because I don't think you can think of something like the Bible and not think something like moral code. Well, I was raised Catholic, like I said, so it was like every week it was like, oh, what am I going to hell for this week? Something new every week, I know. But now so this is what the churches are related to. And if we had more time, we'd go into esoteric anatomy and see that the churches correspond in the spinal cord and the chakras are the flowers that come out. But the churches, as expressed in, say, Revelations, are called as such. We have Ephesus is the first one. There's Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis. Does anybody know the next one? So I know Philadelphia. Who thought? Okay. And then Laodicea. And in that story, as all the, what we consider crazy stuff is happening in that book, the Christ is coming to each one of those churches and telling them what they've done good and why he loves them, what they need to fix, this kind of thing. So we're now bringing also another element into working with the chakras, and that's something we can just synthesize as virtue. Virtues. They're also related with virtues. You guys okay with that? Because I could say, oh, for 20 hours and just have nothing but contempt for life and human beings and people. And do I think I'm going to awaken a chakra that's related with love by having hate or contempt? It's blocking the growth of our consciousness. So here's something that's related to the virtues. Patience. The first chakra in its awakening, working with is related with the virtue of patience. So if I want to, say, awaken the chakras and work with the chakras, then I'll mantralize with positive emotion and concentration and practice the virtue of patience throughout the day, where it's going to be the hardest. In my meditation room, it's no problem. I can be patient. Okay? But when I'm going, now I have to get to a lecture and I'm late, I'm not so patient. So this is how I would work with that chakra in a practical setting in the world. Okay, next one. Brace yourselves. Ooh. Oh. What is this about? We can think of this much in a different sense. We can think of it in purity in this region of our life. And by purity, I mean the opposite of that would be this vice we call lust. So to objectify people, to just use them as a means to gratify your own selfish needs. Chastity is different. Now, if you go to any of the major traditions, say you go to Hinduism, you got Brahmacharya, which is chastity. You go to the Tibetan Buddhist monks, chaste. Christian monks, chaste. Nuns, chaste. You see, it's a big part of all traditions. It's a deep aspect of Gnosis, and it doesn't mean chastity in the way we understand it. But I don't think we can go in that door yet. I'm already a little over time. But you guys are like, what? Don't leave us hanging. What are we supposed to do? So it's really the idea of purifying your emotions and your intent, and it has to do with things like, as a suggestion, like monogamy, faithfulness, love, companionship, compassion, all of these things within the sexual realm, as opposed to taking, using, see you never, thanks for the night. It's a much different gesture. That would be what we would call egoic. And we're trying to go beyond this egoic. So chastity could be working with purity. So let's not use any really in-depth examples. Let's say I happen to be married, so I'll just work, and my sexual life will be with my wife. How about? That's a good way to start. It's not a moral thing, but I'm saying if I want to go beyond the egoic, then it's going to be hard for me to have a sexual relation with my wife and then be going all around town trying to fulfill other needs which are purely lustful. Right? So that's an idea. People who are younger, work with it how you want. I didn't get these teachings as a young man, I'm just going to say. So, the next one is temperance. We can work with concentrating on the solar plexus, but temperance is a word maybe is not as common today because we never practice it. It means having a little bit of food. It means not overindulging. Temperance is the opposite of overindulging. Temperance takes something very important, especially in Gnosis, but every path of development, it takes willpower. It's easy not to not become tempered. It's easy to just eat as much as you want, or binge watch as much as you want, or just lie around all day instead of vacuuming like your wife wants you to do, right? So temperance is moderation in all things. So we can be working with concentration, positive emotion, and moderation. No doubt that the heart chakra was going to be love, of course. So when we're working with concentrating, we're practicing love. Now, another little caveat. Until we incarnate the higher potentials of our consciousness, in the Gnostic tradition, it's seen that we don't truly know how to love yet. And then we always go, man, come on. Like, I think something really close to what we're talking about with love would be something like, the mother or the parent with a newborn child. This total selflessness that this little thing comes first now. It's not the love like when I was 13 and that, I love you, baby, I love you. It's not like the pop songs want us to believe, but it's love essentially means negating of your self-interest for the other. That's love. This is self-sacrifice. Then there's justness, working with justness, not just in word, but in action and in thought. So we have a lot of areas in Gnosis now. Now I'm responsible for what I say. I'm also responsible for what I feel. I'm also responsible for what I think. And if I'm working with this chakra, I'm going for justness. Justness. Is what I'm saying just? Is it right? And not the kind of just where I'm self-righteous. I'm like, yeah, I did it for their own good. And I like yelling at people. So, then there's serenity. And this, for the idea of clairvoyance, is being calm. This is why we practice meditation also. To become serene. Because we're not going to be able to peer into the spiritual world if we're always projecting. Our mind is always active and not passive. The idea is to make the mind passive so it can receive instead of project. Then the final virtue is called will. But it's the higher will. The will of something like your inner God or your highest consciousness, to follow that will. That will has a plan. That may not be the plan you had. You're like, yeah, I'm going over here. No, you're going over there. Okay. So now we're following this higher will. So with all of that in mind, this is how we, in general, practice with these 7 vowels. So it's not just, when you start practicing with it, of course it can be like, E, when is this meditation over? Hey, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? All of these, this is how meditation always starts. But through deepening and deepening it, we start to focus more, have more positive feeling. So I'm just going to end with just 2 sort of last points. And that's, if we work with those vowels, if we work with positive emotion and concentration, and we work with those virtues associated with them, it's like we're spinning the discs. We're waking them up. We're getting them to strengthen and spin. But it's not a permanent awakening. The one way to permanently awaken all of the chakras is through working with awakening this Kundalini energy. And that's the permanent way, but the way in is through the meditation. And the second way is by eliminating what we call the ego, the vices, all the negative emotions and thoughts that keep me chained down to physicality, really. So these are much deeper practices, and we're not going to go into great detail about them, although we extensively study them in the Gnostic school for sure. But suffice it to say that they're also reflected in these traditions we looked at. Here's Krishna, where he overcomes the serpent. And even if you think of, like Shiva always has this serpent around the neck. The serpent has been a symbol of the awakening of the Kundalini across cultures. And even to the point where, I don't know if you're aware, but in Peterborough, we have this really sacred site called the Serpent Mounds. Have you heard of this? It's like a huge serpent eating an egg made out of mounds of earth. You can't see it anymore because, of course, there was a land dispute where the government thought, hey, we should have that. And then the owners of the land said, no way, we're shutting it down. Nobody's welcome anymore. But that site matches others. There's one in Ohio, the same, the Serpent Mound. Just this sort of all forms of serpent worship in their purest, or in the thread that combines them, is this Kundalini force, this conscious energy at the base of the spine that we raise. Think of an Egyptian pharaoh with the cobra on the forehead. Also, we have the Buddha. He attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and it was this great Naga, in some traditions called Mukalinda, the king of the serpents, that comes up behind him, up to his head, and covers him so that the rain doesn't touch him, and he can continue meditating. This is the serpent worship. This is the Kundalini reference. Now there's another one that seems that we'd be a little bit surprised at, but even biblically, if you look in the Old Testament, there's a story of Moses. He takes the Israelites out of the bondage in Egypt, and it's a very deep, internally important story. And as literal history can leave that for other people, we're talking esoteric. But in the wilderness, they kept getting bitten by these fiery serpents. He's like, what am I going to do about this? This is ridiculous. So, paraphrasing. So then God tells him to put a brazen serpent on a pole. Raise a serpent on a pole, and all the dead Israelites, when they look at that serpent, they'll come back to life. So because in Judeo-Christianity, we see the inverse where the serpent becomes negative, right? Adam and Eve, the fall from paradise, the negative tempting serpent. But it is also positive. Then in the New Testament, there's also this point that says, which is, people don't unlock it that much, but it says, and I'll paraphrase again just because I don't have it memorized, but just as Moses raised the serpent in the wilderness, so too must you raise up the Christ in your heart. So now they're equating the Christ as the solar hero, as the point of consciousness, as the serpent. He becomes the serpent. And in the ancient Gnostic traditions, I'm using this word because there's always an outer group and an inner group, and in the earliest days of Christianity, the inner group was called the Gnostics. And they got suppressed, of course, and they didn't make it into what later became the Catholic Church. But there are groups that were called like the Ophites, the serpents. They had coins that on the front was the crucifixion, on the back was the serpent of Moses, and they had a lot of serpent imagery. This was a more esoteric branch of Christianity before it became institutionalized. But in the battle for institutionalization, all these other groups sort of lost out, and then we have by like 325, this is what that is. So it's also in there, which is interesting. Now on the other side, this is going to be the last couple slides, I promise you. We have Krishna and Arjuna. Here's Krishna with the halo, and Arjuna, the warrior. This is from the Bhagavad Gita, and they're on the battlefield. And he has to fight all of his enemies and his family members. This is an allegory of the death of the ego. Our old traditions, all these things about me that I think I am, that make up my personality, all the things that I think are great about me, but are just projections of my mind, and they have nothing to do with the eternal or previous lives. It's what's really chaining me down into the physical world. I have to fight against that. It's showed this way. And Buddha displays it this way, again under the Bodhi tree. All the distractions come. The beautiful ladies, the wars, these are like the warring thoughts, the hurricanes, the fire. Everything's trying to get him to dissuade him from his path, but he overcomes all of it. That's the ego. And then he says, the earth is my witness, and Mara is destroyed. Mara is the inner ego. And we haven't talked enough about ego to have total context, I understand, but maybe it'll come up in the questions. And then in Christianity, we have the idea of Christ casting the moneylenders out of the temple. The temple is you, the body, the mind. This is the temple. The moneylenders are all the concerns that are only related to the physical world. And that I see, there is what I can see and nothing beyond that. And the consciousness is casting those out. So, beyond those 7 vowels, with positive emotion and concentration, with working with the virtues, there is another path to awaken those chakras also, to bring the consciousness to the astral body, the mental body, and a couple others beyond it. That's the end of the lecture. So I'm going to have one last slide, which isn't really a plug, but that we are starting a new class on Tuesday, February 5th. Everybody's welcome to come at the Gnostic Center. It's from 7 to 9. We do each week, it'll be like Tuesday, 7 to 9, come for a talk and then a meditative practice. We ask for $30 a month donation because we're a non-profit organization. You know, my wife tells me never to say this, but I always do. If you can't swing $30 a month, don't worry, just come. It's not a problem. It's not a big problem. You know. And then also with that we have, because she deals with the finances, not because she's greedy. I don't deal with that side of it because we're running our little center there. But we have a book study once a week. We have a meditation night once a week. We have workshop intensives every once in a while and retreats every once in a while. So, there's our lecture. Are there questions? Yeah.
Do you have any events in the early morning, early afternoon?
Not generally, no, because we're generally at work those times. Yes. But, you know, possibly. Any questions about anything? It doesn't have to be about this. It could be about the whole thing. Yes? Well, we don't put the address there because it's an apartment complex that we've converted in the basement of my home. So, but it's at the corner of Wonderland and Sarnia. And if you're interested in coming, we have sign-up sheets, and then we'll email you the address, no problem. Not that we don't like you, but I don't know all these people. I'm just going to put my address out there. It's a little weird. A little worried. But it's, yeah, Sarnia and Wonderland. It's not far from the bus stop there. That's where we are. Yeah.
What do you recommend as perhaps like a morning daily practice that we could do each day? Something that would be maybe within like a 20-minute, 30-minute period that would help with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, definitely the 7 vowels. So to sit down in a comfortable position and slowly go through E, A, O, U, A, S, for as much time as you have. And as you do that more and more often, you'll get more and more consciousness, and you'll start to get more and more insights of your dreams, dream recall, consciousness in the day, because now we're activating these chakras, which are these organs of perception in these higher bodies. So I would recommend E, A, O, U, A, M, S for an hour a day. But if you have 20 minutes, 20 minutes, no problem. Yes?
What would you say are the biggest differences between the Gnostic Bible and the modern James Bible?
Well, the Gnostic Bible would have to, there's not one Gnostic Bible. Say we have, there's the Pistis Sophia, there's a Nag Hammadi library, there's a bunch of Gnostic texts, but the biggest difference I would say would be setting. So one is set in a Christian mythology and terminology, and one is set with Hindu. But the inner meanings of them are very similar. Because in a Gnostic perspective, you wouldn't read a sacred scripture literally or externally, but internally about your own psychology and spiritual development. And both books are the same. And in the school, we study all of these different traditions and scriptures, of course. Yeah. There's one up here too, so yeah.
When you did the ohms, you started at the top and went down.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that what you would suggest? Because every other time you were always starting at the bottom and going up.
Yeah, when we're doing the meditation, I would suggest E, A, O, U, A, M, S. If you switch the order around, it's not going to change. You still have to focus on which chakra it is that you're doing with positive emotion. But the one we practice in the school is that one. E, A, O, U, A, M, S. Yeah, yes?
Are there different mudras corresponding to each chakra?
Different mudras?
Mudras, yes.
Yeah.
Mudras.
Okay. Not specifically in Gnosis. So the idea is, the mudras are like,
The different gestures that you
Yes,
have
right.
correspond to each.
So they had this word like asana, which is the word for like the posture we take, the lotus asana, right?
Yeah.
One idea of what the Gnostic school is, it's a school of synthesis for the current time, and that it all matters about our concentration and positive emotion, and the position we take is what's comfortable. So, like for instance, it said that you don't have to do lotus position to reach enlightenment. You have to be conscious. You have to work internally. So it's not specifically in the school, although in other schools I know there definitely are. Yes? Yes?
Is this knowledge of the Gnostic practices, is that is coming from Hinduism, or because you're using some vowels as well, you're getting based on the chakras, so
Right.
like the chakras is Hinduism,
Yes.
but those vowels, like where are they coming from?
Yeah.
Like S and
Yeah. So the Gnostic tradition that we're part of was founded by a person named Samael Aun-Weor.
what?
His name was Samael Aun-Weor, and he was a Colombian. He lived from 1917 to 1977, who followed different esoteric paths, and then unveiled a path to how he reached his own inner enlightenment with his own inner being and his consciousness. And then this is the school that we study. And he studied everything. Everything. This is why we bring in all cultures, all systems, all religions, all mythologies. So that's where it would come from. Because the idea is that the human being isn't different because of geography or where they're born. The human being stays the same. We all made the same. Still we have the same 2 eyes, 2 ears, all these things. The internal makeup's the same also. This is why we study all these cultures. It's a good question. Thank you. Okay, we have one
Could we
here
go
now.
back to the slide that had the vowels on it
Sure.
so that I could take a picture of?
Sure, of course. I'm also happy to, many of you I have your email contacts because you signed up. I'm happy to send you a PDF if you want it. It's fine. Yeah. And also, if you are interested in signing up for the classes, of course there's no you're not going to sign a contract and owe us $30 a month forever. No, you just come or don't come, it's fine. But you can sign up at the front with Tanya, or maybe you can talk to Paul if he's around. And we have, if you registered, we have your email. If you don't want to sign up but you're interested in maybe another free lecture, you can check that box too also. Yeah.
If I understand the definition of Gnosis,
Yep.
it's a priority on the direct experience.
You understand.
How does today's presentation relate to the other practices of the Gnostic society?
Well, those practices, say with the 7 vowels, will lead us slowly, or depending on who we are, maybe not so slowly, towards a direct experience of the chakras. And now it's a big part of the system, but it's not the entirety of the system, for sure. But like the word we all probably know is agnostic, right? We all heard that word, which means no one can know, don't try, there's no point. Gnostic's the opposite. It means everyone can know, try, find out for yourself. So it's a part of it. The chakras are all a big part of it. But the main focus has to do with the psychology, but we study a lot of different cultures. So this idea of the ego and finding out, trying to know ourselves through our actions, what causes me to do these actions, and who's in control. Is it me? Is it my emotions? Is it my thoughts? And working towards self-analysis, towards self-knowledge. And the chakras are all part of that. Yes?
You said the Kundalini was permanent, but I've experienced experiencing it and then coming back through stress and life situations.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm wondering
Yeah.
the permanence, I guess.
Well, the idea is that with the awakening of the Kundalini, the chakras open permanently. If we do it slowly in the specific ways that we teach. Other people have had other experiences. So in your experience, you awakened it and then unawakened it, if I understand correctly. Yeah? I don't have any experience with that. I know one tradition and it's this one. I'm not negating what's happened to me. Yes?
You mentioned that you would expand on the Akashic record.
Oh yes.
I don't know if I missed that.
Yeah, sorry. So I talked about the astral body in relation to an astral plane. When the people say they access the Akashic records, it's their conscious and their astral body in this other parallel universe, the astral plane or the dream world, where you can access knowledge of the past and the present just because time isn't linear there. I know that's a lot to take in. But the idea of becoming conscious in a dream in this dream world that has much different laws. It doesn't have these laws of time, per se, as seconds going by. And so the Akashic Records is there, the ability in that state to access the past and possible future outcomes, but there's always variables that you can't account for. So the Akashic Records is that, simplified. If someone says, I accessed the Akashic Records and I found, there's no file system, it's not an actual record book, it's this parallel state of consciousness where all things can be known, but we have to be aware, because also in that state, not to give a second lecture, but our inner mind, we're always projecting onto the astral plane. This is why our dreams are so personalized, because all of our internal fears become externalized and we have nightmares. But we're actually in a place that we can't see because it's like we put on a virtual reality helmet, and all of our preconceptions, thoughts, worries become the external reality. Astral projection, although it sounds really fancy, is like taking that helmet off and seeing where you actually are. Maybe our next public lecture will be on lucid dreaming, which is a term people know. Does that answer the question for you? Good. Don't want to leave anybody hanging. Yeah?
I guess just on a side note, with the video footage here, I could always email that to you, and then if people want to get that from you, they could have that option.
Okay, good option.
Okay, cool. And then one thing that I just want to ask you about, that I've thought about in relation to the chakras that's really resonated with me, is that it's not so much just about being able to open up the chakras, but it's also being able to balance the chakras. So as a quick example, having an open heart chakra that's too open might kind of like be you over-giving and putting yourself in like vulnerable situations and not having clear boundaries, whereas like a balanced heart chakra would be like having those clear boundaries to be able to like show up in the best way possible. I was just curious if you had like thoughts on the balanced chakra concept.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a very good point. So for instance, the heart chakra of love, but if I'm overly loving, you have to say, what am I really? Am I worried about my self-image? That's not love. Do I want people to see me as a giving person? That's not love. So the ego plays a strong point in what love actually is. Do I have a part of me that wants to be the victim? We don't believe it's true, but there are parts of us that look for that, so I can be poor me and then people can feel sorry for me. That's also not love. So to balance the chakras would in Gnosis entail also eliminating these what we call egos or vices or negative aspects, so that it is the pure virtue that's coming through, not tainted by egoism. Barb?
Phil, could you go back to the virtues so we can get pictures of them as well,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think I saw another hand, so. Oh, there's one over there, yes? No, that's not a hand. Sorry. Oh, yes?
When you say that person, the kids, they studied many and brought it all, would alchemy be one of those studies?
Absolutely. One of the core. We studied many things, but alchemy is definitely a core one. Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, religious traditions, psychology, anthropological studies, all of that. Definitely. I'm not saying it lightly, like, yeah, whatever you like, we do. But alchemy is definitely one of the main things that we focus on.
And I'm sort of familiar with that, so that's why I asked.
Yeah. The alchemical tradition being like religious traditions being sort of an allegory for something internal as opposed to trying to make actual lead into gold. It's the lead of the personality or the ego into the gold of the spirit. This in a nutshell.
And it's the symbolism.
Oh yes.
That for me anyway, I relate to.
Yep.
For some reason.
No, of course we're drawn to certain versions of the teaching, say.
Yeah.
Yeah, we study alchemy for sure. Yes.
Sort of going off of her question,
Yes.
you go into the quantum physics and vibrational stuff kind of thing that goes with like raising your vibration.
To a degree, of course, because the teaching, like the teacher who left the teachings that we're studying, departed in the 70s, so we know quantum physics has made leaps and bounds since then. So what we do look at that because it seems like quantum physics is in the forefront of bridging, say, metaphysics or science and religion. So it's a very interesting topic for us, especially considering we have these 4 main branches that we study. It's called philosophy, art, mysticism, and science, and that the idea in a golden age or an awakened person, they're all one thing. Not separate. Well, definitely, because those are classic Gnostic terms for sure. Yeah, we definitely do. Especially we do in-depth study of Pistis Sophia, the fall of consciousness through the archons, the creator demiurge, this sort of spirit between the ultimate spirit and the creation. Yeah, definitely. We study the ancient Gnostics as well as, this is what we would consider modern Gnosticism. There's no direct lineage to the original Gnostics, but it's very compatible with the idea that every individual can experience divinity for themselves without the need of an intermediary, like a medium or a priest, say. We can do it for ourselves. Yes?
Just looking at the chakras, can you have one that's open without the other one that's open? Like, does it have to fall like in a certain...
Well, it's a good question. There's sort of two questions. Like, I could work with my heart chakra and say my third eye chakra by doing like E, O, and I can work with them and strengthen them that way. But the actual opening that we're talking about comes with the Kundalini. And the Kundalini goes from chakra to chakra, so it is in a successive order. But through the meditation that we're talking about, you can work with any or all of them and notice that those parts of your perception or those parts of the virtues are increasing.
Because I find, for me, some of the ones like I'll get dreams that happen often, or I'll have clairaudience often, but I've had it since I was very young.
Sure.
So it's like I don't know if, I know which ones that I need to work on, but I'm just wondering if that's something.
Yeah, I would go with, like, if you have some experiences and you want to deepen them, then do it. If you want to go for more balance, then do the whole thing. It's ideal to do all of them, because just like I don't want to have really good seeing and then give up hearing for it. Right? It's nice, it's okay for deaf, it's no problem. But it's nice to have as many senses as we can, and we get a better idea of the world that way. If you think of the animal kingdom, they're always evolving through the senses, like a worm, not very good eyesight, eagle, better eyesight, different view of the world. Yes?
Do you have you ever studied Vaishnavism, Shaktism, and Shaivism? Or do you have, it's like three Vedic life paths? Or do you have any interpretation of it?
Yeah, the Shiva Shakti path, so like Shiva, divine masculine, Shakti, divine feminine. It's not that path per se, but we study it in a...
interpretation?
Yeah, like the idea of maybe just very superficially, sorry.
Like Shaktism would be more of the Reiki, I guess, and the physical healing.
Well, I've seen a lot of like the Shakti practices seem to be like I'm forgetting the term of the type of yoga, but they're very emotional, like the dancing, the singing, and Shivaism's different.
More self-conscious.
Self-conscious. So one could be classified as, say, classically feminine, more emotional. One could be classified as classically masculine, I'm being very careful with these words, which is intellectual. So we work on the balance of harmonizing masculine and feminine energies within ourselves. Like we brushed quickly about Ida, Pingala, these two currents that every individual has within them. But that's a big part of the teaching also, because one is feminine, one is masculine. Everybody has both polarities within, but we have to awaken those also. But yeah, in symbolism for sure. So, yes?
With like the chakras, you're talking a lot about like symbolism and stuff.
Right.
There's one sort of symbolism that leads me into a question, but it's basically like the idea of the spinning water wheels. So like in that sense, like to be able to have the fully functioning spiral moving all the way, like that's where, it can kind of get like stuck on one water wheel. But the visualization that I like from that is to kind of think that over time society kind of like gunks up these water wheels with like mud and everything. Yeah. So like part of what we're doing with our practices is basically just like removing the dirt, removing the mud, so that these wheels can spin naturally as they do. And my question is that like with the chakra practices, is it basically something where like if you don't do the practices they atrophy and then like the mud builds up and that's why we have to do it routinely?
Absolutely, yeah. They atrophy to a sense that we're spinning them, like I said, by doing the mantras. This has an idea. We're spinning them so they get more energy, more power, and then I stop spinning it, well slowly it's going to spin down. And you said an interesting word too about society. And what's interesting about society is that it's us. So when we say like, because society is in such a way that it gunks us up, that's our ego. Society is a reflection of us. So there is no society apart from us, right? The society is the conglomeration of all the individuals, and the path that we choose in this society based on every one of our individual choices seems to be away from spirituality mostly, towards materialism, which would be gunking it up. Yeah. I also want to mention one thing quickly before I take some more questions is, if you feel like you have to go, but you do want to sign up, you can feel free to come up and sign up, and Tanya will be there happy to sign you up. And if you have to go, don't feel like you're being rude, it's no problem. Okay, yes, at the back there? Yeah, you.
Oh, what's the difference between using the vowels and the mantras? Is it better to use the vowels?
Well, like in the Gnostic tradition, there's so many practices because there's so many individuals and personal preferences. Some people might find an attachment to like Uvar, they like saying it, it's cool to get the Wubars. But ideally they don't do different things. They do the same function. So I find the vowels easier because they seem a little more accessible because we know vowels. Yeah, yes?
You mentioned that you started off in the Roman Catholic Church.
Yes.
You also mentioned that agnostic is kind of an antithesis of Gnosticism. Are there any other schools of thought or institutions that are sympathetic or antagonistic to what it is that you guys are about?
Probably most spiritual schools are similar. Theosophy, the Blavatsky school, Anthroposophy, the Steiner school. They all teach us similar, so I'd say sympathetic. The thing that would be perhaps like the idea that you don't need an institution to reach divinity puts a lot of institutions, say, at end with this philosophy. The idea that each individual can do it for themselves. Well, if they could, then you don't really need a pope. So when they take it in those contexts, then maybe, but you don't have to, there's no requirement in Gnosis to be anything. You can be any religion and deepen your religious experience through self-knowledge and self-esoteric studying, let's say. Gnosis requires people not to change their lifestyles so much, other than in the realm of ego and virtue and vice, these kinds of things. Good. We also have 20 more minutes on the clock, and I'm happy to go through the meditation if people want to go through the 7 vowels together. I find it to be, people are mixed on that because we're in a big room of strange people. People get self-conscious sometimes about mantralizing, but I'm very happy to do that. But I also don't want to leave anybody with unanswered questions, but also to mention that at 3 is when it's officially over. I'll be here cleaning up till 3:34. So if you're shy of asking questions in front of people, but you have something you want to say, then feel free to come up and we can talk about it. Yeah?
Yeah, I know you mentioned this before, but you said you were based at Wonderland in Sarnia?
Yeah.
That's correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right by, I don't know if you know Wilford Jury Public School, but right in that neighborhood over there. That's where it is. Yes?
Do you have a Facebook group or?
Yes. Yeah, the Facebook group our group is called the International Gnostic Association for Anthropological Studies. It's on here, which is a mouthful. But on Facebook it's called IGAAS, because IGAAS is the French acronym. But if you search IGAAS on Facebook, you have an official. Okay. My pleasure. IGAAS. It's also should be on the pamphlets. If you feel like you want to take one, all the contact info is there, except for the Facebook page. And you can also, on gnosis.ca, you can look for all the centers that are around Ontario, Quebec, and worldwide, if you're traveling.
So,
yes?
Can we sign up here, or?
Yeah, you can sign up here for sure. You come see Tanya, who's right over there with I'm not great with colors that aren't red or blue. I think it's teal, perhaps?
Yeah.
Sweater? Yeah. Yes. So why don't we do a 15-minute meditation on the 7 vowels. If you don't feel comfortable with it, then feel free to leave, there's no problem. If you want to sign up before you leave, don't feel bad about making noise while we meditate. It's also fun. Right?
No, all right.
Okay, so we'll start our meditation. It will be about 10-15 minutes of IGAAS. It'll be guided. So if you're in the front, you might feel like I'm yelling at you. In the back, if you want would you be more comfortable with those lights off? We can make it happen. No? They're okay. Right. Yeah, sure. So if you can write this way, just write PDF. And then I'll notice on the PDF. Okay. So there's also this old saying about meditation, where a young monk goes up to the master and says, "I've mastered meditation." And the master says, "Okay, go outside and meditate." And he says, "But it's raining." And he says, "You haven't mastered it." So we're going to be meditating, and we don't mind if people around us are talking and moving. It's fine. We're okay. So our first step is to find a comfortable position in our chair. Comfortable enough that we can sit there for another 15 minutes. I know we've done a lot of sitting. And we close our eyes and begin to just focus your attention and concentration on your breath. Just watching the natural rise and fall of your inhale and exhale. And as you're naturally breathing, with your consciousness, scan your body, trying to find any point of strain or stress, a muscle held in tension. And if you find one, simply release it with the exhale. Feel that strain, that tension leave your physical body. And we're going to mantralize the 7 vowels. For the first time, I'll suggest the area you should be focusing on, like the third eye or the throat. So the mantras are I, A, O, U, A, S. We're going to begin with I, focusing on our third eye. Breathing in, we can begin. Now we focus on the heart with O. The solar plexus with U. With A. The sacral chakra with M. Of the spine, the bottom seat with S. third eye with E. The throat with A. The heart with O. The solar plexus with U. The lungs with Ah. The sacral, or uterus, prostate, sexual organ with M. The tailbone with S. And we continue. keeping our mind focused on the practice. One more time. Focus your attention on your physical body. Keep your mind calm. Experience the new vibrational state of your internal universe. Bring to consciousness the floor that's under your feet, the chair that you're sitting in, the weight of the physical body, this room, this space, as our practice is now finished. So that was just entering into working with the chakras through mantras for 15 minutes. But you can imagine the effects if you built on a practice more seriously, 20 minutes a day, half an hour a day in your time, coupling that with working on the virtues, you can notice a difference. I'm not trying to tell you what you notice. So if anybody has questions, I'll be here. If you're interested in signing up for the Tuesday class, we're here. If you're interested in signing up, but Tuesday doesn't work, we can make other days available. I'm happy to speak with anybody who wants to talk. Thank you all for coming. It was so nice that so many of you